Mr. Comer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the WHO did not step up to the plate. Instead, it aligned itself with the Chinese Communist Party. On December 31st, 2019, Taiwan sent an email to the WHO that warned about a potential outbreak, particularly human-to-human transmission. On January 14th, 2020, ignoring this warning, the WHO, based on information from China, claimed there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. This tweet contradicted even the WHO's own experts. Then, in June of 2020, the WHO was still claiming there was no transmission of COVID-19. So this was also false. Starting with Ms. Pace and going down the line, do you agree that these statements were not accurate?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We, of course, are here to really learn the lessons of COVID-19, and one of the things that we have talked about with WHO is the importance of ensuring that we get to the bottom of its origins.
Ambassador?
I fully agree with my colleague. WHO should continue to be reformed, strengthen its reform, so that in future they can actually play the role that they've played in the past in protecting us.
Doctor?
And I would agree with your calling out that the Chinese government was intransigent, was not transparent, and was behaving irresponsibly. This is the situation where the WHO was too credulous. They called out Chinese behavior in SARS, and were willing to call out publicly that China was not being forthcoming. And in this particular case, they did not until too late. So now there was more they did better, but this was important.
Well, the WHO also praised China's transparency during the outbreak, even while China was silencing journalists and whistleblowers were going missing. Again, down the line, do you think China was forthcoming in sharing data about the pandemic? Ms. Pace?
No, sir, absolutely not.
Ambassador?
No.
Doctor?
No.
So the flaws of the WHO all culminated in its origins report in 2021, a report based off an investigation that only had one American, Peter Daszak, who was funding the lab being investigated. He was the only American on that. Had its access to labs restricted by the Chinese Communist Party, and the Chinese Communist Party had final editing privileges of the report. So it's no wonder the report was bogus. Dr. Fauci said he had considerable concerns about the report. And Secretary Blinken said we've got real concerns about the methodology and the process that went into that report, including the fact that the government in Beijing helped write the report. Ambassador, do you believe the Chinese government improperly influenced the outcome of the report?
They did.
Ms. Pace, it is our understanding that the U.S. put forward some names to be part of that investigation and China rejected them. Is that your understanding as well?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I do know that the U.S. has worked to not just put forward names for that particular investigation, but for the multiple visits or investigations and missions that the WHO was seeking to have.
So did China reject those names?
I am not aware of why those recommendations were not accepted, unfortunately. But
it's our understanding that China rejected those, like China was calling the shots. So the WHO took China's word time and time again. Ms. Pace, how can we better ensure that the WHO reports facts, not just what the Chinese Communist Party is telling them?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It is important for us to get to the bottom of this. I just want to take a step back and also note the multiple missions, international missions that WHO...
We know about the missions. We just have a problem with China, or I have a problem with China calling the shots on it. I don't think that turned out very well during COVID-19. My last question for each of you, and you can just answer yes or no for the sake of time. Do you believe that the Chinese government ought to be held accountable for the lack of cooperation in the early days of the pandemic? Ms. Pace.
Thank you, sir. We do think that the international health regulations and improving those will make all countries be
But
held
should
accountable.
should China be held accountable?
We believe all countries should be held accountable for
Well, I
any
mean,
violation of those.
Do you not think China's a little special in this situation since it, by all accounts, came from China and they completely lied and were not truthful with the world population about the outbreak of COVID-19, that they, had veto power over who America put on boards and rejected reports that we now know could have been helpful?
I share your frustration with China's lack of cooperation.
But should we hold China accountable?
Well, that's something that we're trying to do by amending these international health regulations and ensuring that violations can't happen in the way that they did previously.
Ambassador, should we hold China accountable?
I think China, we've said, Congressman, that transparency and accountability were totally lacking, and we hope that it is the purpose and intent of the IHI reforms and the pandemic agreement accord that will bring more accountability to any country, and not just PRC, but any country in future when they default.
Doctor?
Yes, China should be called to account, and that and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence has indicated that we are still in a world where there's no definitive answer to two viable theories about the origins of COVID, and that in order to resolve this issue, the People's Republic of China would need to be forthcoming about data that can resolve these issues, which they have not been.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I yield back.